Hello, everyone, and welcome back to English in Advance. I am your host, Jessica, and I am so incredibly happy that you are here with me today. We are about to embark on a wonderful journey together, a journey that is going to transform the way you understand spoken English. Today's episode is all about enhancing your English listening skills, specifically designed for those of you at the intermediate level, hovering comfortably between B1 and B2. If you find yourself in that space where you can understand a lot, but sometimes you get lost when a native speaker talks just a little too fast, or when you watch a movie without subtitles and feel a bit of panic, then this is exactly the right place for you. We are going to take our time, we are going to breathe, and we are going to explore the sounds of English in a way that is simple, relaxing, and incredibly effective. So I want you to find a comfortable spot, maybe grab a cup of tea or coffee, relax your shoulders, and let's get started. You know, learning English is a bit like learning how to play a musical instrument. At first, you are just trying to find the right notes. You are looking at the sheet music, you are figuring out where to put your fingers, and it takes all of your concentration just to play a simple melody. That is the beginner stage. But now, you are at the intermediate stage. You know the notes. You know the grammar, you have a good vocabulary, but the music, the actual flow of the language, that is what we need to work on. Listening is the heart of music. It is the heart of communication. Many of you have told me that reading is easy for you, but listening is hard. Why is that? Why does the English language look so different on paper compared to how it sounds in real life? Well, that is the secret we are going to unlock today. Let's start by talking about the biggest barrier to listening. It is not usually the vocabulary. I know you might think, "Oh, Jessica, I just don't know enough words." But I bet you know more than you think. The real problem is how those words change when they are put into a sentence. In school, we often learn English word by word. We learn that the word is going, and we learn that the word is to, and we learn that the word is the. So in your head, you expect to hear going to the, three distinct, separate sounds. But have you ever noticed that native speakers rarely sound like that? We don't say going to the, we say gonna. Or even more subtle, we say going to the store, and it sounds like one long word. This phenomenon is called connected speech, and it is the number one reason why listening feels difficult at the B1 and B2 levels. It is the glue that holds our sentences together. Today, I want us to look at listening not as a test, but as a puzzle. When you are listening to me right now, I want you to imagine that you are not trying to catch every single word. That is a mistake many students make. They try to catch every single word like they are catching butterflies with a net. If they miss one butterfly, they panic. They stop listening. They think, "Oh no, I missed that word. I don't understand anything." But I want you to change your strategy. I want you to listen for the big picture first. Listen for the melody. Listen for the stress. In English, we have a rhythm. It is like a drum beat. Some words are loud and clear, and other words are quiet and fast. The loud words are usually the nouns, the verbs, the adjectives, the important words. The quiet words are the grammar words, the prepositions, the articles. If you can catch the loud words, you can usually understand the sentence. For example, imagine I say this sentence very quickly. I went to the store to buy some milk. You might not hear the to, the, or the some. You might hear, I went store, buy milk. And you know what? That is enough. That is enough to understand the meaning. You don't need the small words to get the picture. So my first piece of advice for you today is to let go. Let go of the need to hear every single syllable. Trust your brain to fill in the gaps. Your brain is an amazing machine. It loves patterns. If you hear went and store, your brain knows that there was probably a to in between them, even if you didn't hear it. Trust that process. Now, let's practice this together. I am going to say a sentence in a very natural, slightly fast way. Then I will break it down for you. Here is the sentence. Listen carefully to the rhythm. What are you going to do this weekend? Did you hear that? In normal speech, we don't say, "What are you going to do?" We say, "What you gonna do?" It almost sounds like one breath. What you gonna do? The words, "what are you?" blend into whatcha, and going to becomes gonna. This is not slang, my friends. This is just how English flows. It is easier for our mouths to move that way. We are lazy speakers in a way. We like to use the least amount of energy possible. So, let's try that again. Repeat after me, but don't think about the spelling. Just think about the sound. What you gonna do? I want you to feel how your mouth moves. It is very relaxed. What you gonna do? Now, imagine you are listening to a podcast or watching a YouTube video, and the host says, "What you gonna do?" If you are expecting, "What are you going to do?" you will be confused. But now that you know this pattern, you can recognize it. This is the key. Improving your listening is about predicting what comes next. It is about knowing the habits of the language. Let's explore another common challenge, the famous schwa sound. Have you heard of the schwa? It is the most common sound in the English language, and yet it is the sound that is ignored the most in writing. The schwa sounds like ugh. It is a very lazy sound. It happens in unstressed syllables. For example, the word about. We don't say about, we say about. That first A is a schwa, or the word banana. We don't say banana, we say banana. The middle syllable is stressed, and the first and last are schwas. Banana. Now think about a sentence like, "I want a cup of coffee." The words a and of are not pronounced clearly. We don't say cup, of. We say cup, The of turns into a schwa sound because it is not the important word. The coffee is the important word. I want a cup of coffee. It sounds like cuppa. If you are looking for the word of, you won't find it. It has disappeared into the rhythm of the sentence. Understanding the schwa is a superpower for intermediate learners. When you start listening for that lazy sound, you will start to understand the rhythm of English much better. You will stop getting frustrated because you can't distinguish the small words. You will realize that the small words aren't supposed to be clear. They are supposed to be quiet. It is like a choir. The grammar words are the background singers, and the content words are the lead singers. You listen to the lead singer to hear the song. You don't try to hear every breath of the background choir. So next time you listen to English, try to hum the rhythm. Dum, da, dum, da, dum. If you can hum the rhythm, you are understanding the structure. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit. We have talked about the mechanics of sound, but listening is also about context. Context is the king of comprehension. What do I mean by context? I mean the situation, the environment, the clues that tell you what is happening. As an intermediate learner, you have a great advantage. You have common sense. You have life experience. Use that. When you are listening to something, always ask yourself, who is speaking? Where are they? What is the relationship between them? If you hear two people speaking on the phone and one says, "I'll be there in 5," you don't need to know the exact words before that to know they are probably meeting up. One person is late or confirming arrival. The context fills in the blanks. Let's imagine a scenario. I want you to visualize this. You are sitting in a coffee shop. You hear two people talking at the next table. You can't hear everything, but you catch snippets. You hear the words flight, delayed, airport, and hotel. Even if you didn't hear the full sentences, your brain immediately creates a story. There was a problem with the flight. Someone is stuck. They might need a place to stay. You see, you didn't need perfect grammar to understand that situation. You used keywords and context. This is a vital skill to practice. Stop focusing on what you missed and start focusing on what you caught. If you caught flight and delayed, celebrate that. That is a success. That is communication. We often put too much pressure on ourselves to understand 100%. But think about your native language. Do you understand 100% of what you hear in your own language? If you are walking down the street and hear a snippet of a conversation, do you understand everything? Probably not. And you don't care. You don't stress about it, you just keep walking. We need to bring that same attitude to English. It is okay to miss things. It is okay to only get the general idea. In fact, that is how we mostly listen in real life. We get the gist. We get the main point. We don't analyze every sentence structure. We just listen for the meaning. So how can we practice this gist listening? I have a challenge for you. This week, I want you to find a podcast. Maybe this one or any other English podcast that you enjoy. I want you to listen to just the first 2 minutes. But here is the twist. Don't try to understand the details. Just ask yourself one question. What is the mood? Is the speaker happy? Sad? Serious? Funny? Just identifying the mood is a huge part of listening. The tone of voice tells us so much. In English, our intonation goes up and down to convey emotion. If I say, "Really?" with a high pitch at the end, I am surprised. If I say, "Really?" with a low, flat pitch, I am skeptical or bored. The word is the same, but the music is different. Let's practice intonation for a moment. Intonation is the melody of speech. It is crucial for hearing emotions and attitudes. If you can hear the emotion, you can understand the meaning much better. Let's take the simple phrase, "I don't think so." If I say it in a normal, neutral way, it is just an opinion. I don't think so. But if I say it with a falling pitch, I don't think so, it sounds final. It means definitely not. If I say it with a rising pitch, I don't think so, it sounds like a question or like I am unsure. When you are listening, try to pay attention to the ups and the downs. The voice is like a roller coaster. The high points are usually for new information or questions. The low points are usually for the end of a thought or certainty. Imagine you are listening to a story. The speaker's voice will guide you. When they get to an exciting part, their voice will probably speed up and get higher. When they are sad or serious, their voice will slow down and get lower. These audio clues are your friends. They are like signposts on the road. They tell you where the story is going. For those of you at the B1, B2 level, learning to read these signposts is the next step in your evolution. You have the vocabulary map. Now you need to learn how to read the terrain. Another wonderful way to enhance your listening is through something I call active anticipation. This means predicting what is coming next. When you are listening to a sentence, your brain should be constantly guessing. For example, if I say, "I woke up this morning and I was so hungry, so I decided to make some," your brain is already shouting breakfast or coffee or toast. You don't need to wait until I say the word. You are anticipating the logic of the sentence. This is how native speakers listen. We are always one step ahead, predicting the next word. It makes listening much less tiring because we are participating in the creation of the meaning. To practice this, you can use a technique called shadowing, but with a twist. I call it predictive shadowing. Listen to a slow or intermediate podcast. Pause it after every sentence. Before you repeat it, try to guess what the next sentence will be, or try to finish the sentence before the speaker does. This trains your brain to think in English patterns. It forces you to stop translating in your head. Translating is the enemy of listening speed. If you hear a word, translate it to your language, and then try to understand the sentence, you are always 10 seconds behind. The conversation has moved on without you. You have to trust the English meaning directly. When you hear apple, you shouldn't think of the word in your language. You should see a red fruit in your mind. Direct connection. Let's talk about different accents for a moment. This is something that causes a lot of anxiety for intermediate learners. You might be used to your teacher's accent, or maybe my accent, and then you watch a movie with an Australian actor or a Scottish character, and suddenly you feel like you don't know any English at all. Please, do not panic. This is normal. Accents are like different colors of the same rainbow. The language is the same, but the sound is slightly different. At the B2 level, it is important to expose yourself to variety, but you don't need to understand every accent perfectly. Focus on standard clear accents first, like Standard American or Standard British. Then, slowly, try listening to different ones. The key here is exposure. The more you listen, the more your brain gets used to the variations. It is like getting used to a new font style. At first, it looks strange, but after a while, you can read it easily. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the frustration you might feel. I know that feeling when you have studied so hard. You know the grammar rules, you know the vocabulary lists, and you still can't understand the audio from the textbook. It is incredibly annoying. But please remember, listening is a physical skill. It involves your ears and your brain, processing sound waves. It takes time to build those neural pathways. It is not a test of your intelligence. It is a process of training, just like going to the gym. You don't go to the gym once and look like a bodybuilder. You go consistently. You lift weights that are slightly heavy for you. Listening is the same. You need to listen to things that are slightly difficult but not impossible. This is called comprehensible input. If you listen to something that is 100% easy, you aren't learning. If you listen to something that is 100% impossible, you are just hearing noise. You need that sweet spot in the middle, about 70% understanding. That is where the magic happens. Let's do a little experiment right now. I am going to describe a scene to you. I want you to just listen. Don't write anything down. Don't translate. Just create a movie in your head. Imagine a quiet beach. The sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. The waves are gently rolling onto the shore, making a soft, rhythmic sound. A cool breeze is blowing, and you can smell the salt in the air. You are walking slowly along the water's edge, feeling the wet sand between your toes. There is no one else around, just you and the ocean. Okay, stop there. What did you see? Did you see the pink sky? Did you feel the sand? I used words like rolling, rhythmic, breeze, and shades. Some of those words might have been new or at the edge of your vocabulary. But did you stop me when I said rhythmic? No, you kept going. You used the context of waves and sound to understand that rhythmic probably describes a steady beat. You created an image. That is the goal. That is successful listening. You didn't get stuck on one word. You flowed with the description. This is the mindset we want to cultivate. Flow, not freeze. Now let's discuss a practical strategy for your daily life. How do you actually practice this? Many of you listen to podcasts while doing other things, like driving or cleaning. This is great. It is called passive listening. It helps you get used to the sounds, but to really improve, you also need active listening. Active listening means you are sitting down with no distractions and you are focusing entirely on the audio. You might have a transcript, but you only look at it after you listen. You listen once for the main idea. You listen again for details. You listen a third time to check the grammar structures. This deep work is what moves you from intermediate to advanced. I recommend keeping a listening journal. It doesn't have to be complicated. Just write down 3 things you heard today. Maybe it is a new phrase. Maybe it is a summary of a news story. Maybe it is just a feeling you had about a song. Writing it down makes it real. It makes your brain pay attention. And I want to encourage you to listen to things that you genuinely enjoy. If you love cooking, listen to English cooking shows. If you love technology, listen to tech reviews. When you are interested in the topic, your motivation is higher. You are willing to work harder to understand because you want to know the information. Don't force yourself to listen to boring news if you hate politics. That will only make you associate English with boredom. Find the joy. Let's talk about the speed of speech. This is a huge complaint I hear. Jessica, native speakers talk too fast. Yes, we do. We talk fast because our brains are working fast and we are comfortable with the language. But here is a secret. We don't speak fast all the time. We vary our speed. We speak faster when we are excited or when we are saying something routine. We slow down when we are explaining something difficult or when we are emphasizing a point. You can use this to your advantage. When you hear a sudden slowdown, pay attention. That is usually important information. I went to the store and I saw him. The pause, the slow down, highlights the action. I saw him. Listen for those breaks. The speaker is putting up a red flag saying, "Look here." There are also tools you can use. You can slow down the playback speed on YouTube and on most podcast apps. This is a wonderful tool. If you are struggling with a specific clip, slow it down to 0.75 times speed. It makes the connected speech much clearer. You can hear the gonas and the wannas much better. Listen to it slow, understand it, and then listen to it at normal speed. Your brain will recognize the patterns. But be careful not to rely on this too much. Eventually, you have to jump into the deep end and swim at normal speed. Use the slow speed as a training wheel, not a crutch. I also want to touch on the importance of phrasal verbs. Phrasal verbs are a nightmare for many students, but they are essential for listening. Native speakers use phrasal verbs constantly in spoken English. We say put up with instead of tolerate. We say run out of instead of exhaust. If you are listening for the formal verbs, you will get lost. You need to train your ear to catch these two-part or three-part verbs. Let's take the phrasal verb give up. It means to quit. If I say, don't give up, and you don't know the phrasal verb, you might hear give and up separately and get confused. You might think someone is giving something upwards. Learning phrasal verbs as vocabulary chunks is a listening strategy. If you know the chunk, you hear it as one unit. Give up, look after, turn on. When you learn these, you are actually expanding your listening bandwidth. Let's try a little practice with phrasal verbs in context. Imagine I say, I was late for work because my car broke down on the highway. When us, the phrasal verb is broke down. It means the car stopped working. If you don't know broke down, you might hear broke and think something shattered. But the context of car and late helps you. Broke down is the sound to listen for. Another one. I need to catch up on my emails. Catch up. It means to do something you haven't done yet. Listen to how natural it sounds. Catch up. It blends together. Catch up. It almost sounds like ketchup, the sauce. If you can recognize these blends, your listening will improve instantly. I suggest making a list of the top 20 most common phrasal verbs and just listening for them in movies or podcasts for a week. Just hunt for those specific sounds. It is like a treasure hunt. We should also talk about numbers. Listening to numbers can be surprisingly difficult. Prices, dates, phone numbers, statistics, they fly by very quickly. 1999, 2024, $15.50. The best way to practice this is simply to listen to the news or business reports. They are full of numbers. At the B1, B2 level, you should be comfortable distinguishing between 13 and 30. This is a classic problem. 13 has the stress on the second syllable. 13. 30 has the stress on the first syllable. 30, listen to the stress. If you get this wrong, it can change the price or the time completely. He is 30 years old is very different from he is 13 years old. Context usually helps, but the stress is the key. Let's practice quickly. 13, 30, 14, for tie, 15, 50. Hear that rhythm? It is a drum beat. The teen is heavy. The ty is light. As we continue our journey today, I want to remind you that your ears need rest. Intensive listening, where you are trying hard to understand every detail, is mentally exhausting. It uses a lot of energy. If you feel a headache coming on, or if you feel your brain shutting off, stop. Take a break. Language learning is a marathon, not a sprint. You cannot force your brain to absorb information when it is tired. You might find that after a good night's sleep, the audio sounds clearer the next day. That is because your brain was processing the information while you slept. It is organizing the new sounds and patterns. So be kind to yourself. Rest is part of the process. Let's think about the difference between formal and informal listening. Formal listening is listening to a lecture, a presentation, or the news. The grammar is usually correct. The vocabulary is precise. The speaker speaks clearly. Informal listening is a conversation between friends. There are interruptions. There are hesitations like and There is slang. There is bad grammar. Who did you see instead of whom did you see? Real life is mostly informal. To prepare for this, you need to listen to unscripted content. Interviews are great for this. Talk shows, vlogs. In these situations, people talk over each other. They change topics quickly. They mumble. This is the real test of your B2 skills. Can you follow the messy flow of a real conversation? It takes practice, but it is the most rewarding feeling when you can finally understand a group of friends joking around. I want to give you a specific task to do after this episode ends. I want you to find a short video clip, maybe 3 minutes long, with a native speaker. I want you to listen to it 3 times. The first time, just watch. Don't try to understand everything. Just watch their face, watch their hands. Body language is a huge part of communication. We use our hands to emphasize points. We use our eyebrows to show surprise or doubt. Sometimes you can understand a whole sentence just by looking at the speaker's face. The second time, close your eyes. Just listen. Now you are focusing only on the audio. What words do you recognize? What is the tone? The third time, watch again with subtitles in English. Check what you missed. This listen, read method is very effective for intermediate learners. It builds confidence and accuracy at the same time. Remember that listening is not a passive act. It is an active engagement with another human being's mind. Even if you are listening to a recording, you are connecting with the thoughts of the speaker. Try to empathize with the speaker. What are they feeling? Are they passionate about their topic? Are they bored? Are they trying to sell you something? When you listen with empathy, you listen with a different part of your brain. You are not analyzing language, you are understanding intent. And that is the ultimate goal of language, to understand each other. I also want to address the fear of missing out, FOMO as we call it. In language learning, it is the fear of missing a word. You hear a word you don't know, and you feel that pang of anxiety. What was that? I should know that. I want you to replace that anxiety with curiosity. When you hear an unknown word, say to yourself, interesting, a mystery word, and then keep listening. Often the mystery word is explained by the rest of the sentence, or maybe it is not important at all. If it is important, it will come up again. Learning to tolerate ambiguity, which means being okay with not knowing everything, is a major sign of an advanced learner. If you wait until you understand every single word to feel confident, you will never feel confident. There are words in my own language that I don't know. It is okay. Let's look at some specific vocabulary strategies for listening. When you hear a new word in context, try to guess the meaning from the words around it. For example, if I say, the ancient castle was dilapidated, with broken windows and crumbling walls, you might not know the word dilapidated, but you heard ancient, broken windows, crumbling walls. So you can guess that dilapidated means old and falling apart. You don't need a dictionary, you use the context. This is a critical skill for exams like IELTS or TOEFL, but also for real life. You won't always have a dictionary in your pocket, but you will always have your brain. Another tip is to learn the word families. If you know the word succeed, but you hear success, or successful, or successfully, you might get confused. The sound changes. Succeed has a sharp K sound at the end. Success has a soft S. Knowing how words morph into different forms helps your ear track them. When you learn a new word, learn the whole family. Happy, happiness, unhappy, happily. Listen to how the stress shifts. Happy, happiness. The stress moves to the end. If you are expecting the stress on the first syllable, you won't hear the word happiness. You have to be flexible with your ears. I want to talk about the power of songs. Music is a fantastic way to improve your listening. Songs use rhyme and rhythm, which highlights the sounds of English. However, singing is different from speaking. Singers often stretch vowels and change the rhythm to fit the melody. So use songs for fun and for vocabulary, but don't rely on them for natural speech patterns. But singing along is great for your pronunciation. It helps with linking words together. If you can rap along to a fast song, your mouth is getting a workout in fluency. So turn on the radio and sing your heart out. It counts as practice. Let's return to the idea of shadowing. I mentioned it earlier, but I want to go deeper. Shadowing is when you listen to audio and repeat it almost immediately, like a shadow following a person. You don't wait for the sentence to finish. You speak while they are speaking. It is hard. It forces your brain to process the sound and produce it instantly. At first, you will stumble. You will make mistakes. That is fine. Just keep trying. Shadowing connects your ear to your mouth. It helps you internalize the rhythm and intonation. Choose a speaker you like, someone with a clear voice. Try to be their shadow. Copy their emotion. If they laugh, you laugh. If they whisper, you whisper. It is like acting. You are playing the role of the speaker. This builds a deep connection with the language. Let's continue our exploration by focusing on something that often gets overlooked in textbooks, and that is the incredible power of hesitation and fillers. You know those moments in conversation when someone pauses? In a textbook dialogue, everything is perfect. Person A says something, and person B responds immediately with perfect grammar. But in the real world, life is messy. We need time to think. We need time to breathe. And if you don't understand these little thinking sounds, you might lose track of the conversation entirely. Think about the sound or ooh. These are not just meaningless noises, they are traffic signals. When a native speaker says they are usually telling you, "Hold on, I'm searching for a word," or "I'm formulating my next idea." For a listener, this is actually a gift. It gives you a moment to catch up. It gives you a break. If you are listening to a fast speaker and suddenly you hear a prolonged you can relax. You don't need to process information for that split second. You can reset your brain. However, if you are trying to ignore these sounds because you think they are not real words, you might misunderstand the rhythm. For example, compare these two sentences. I want to go to the store versus I want to go to the store. The signals a slight hesitation, maybe uncertainty about where to go. Without the sentence is confident. As an intermediate learner, learning to interpret the silence and the hesitation is just as important as understanding the words. There are also other filler words that we use to keep the conversation moving without actually saying anything concrete. Words like, you know, I mean, and basically. These words are everywhere. If you listen to a teenager or even just a casual conversation between friends, you will hear the word like constantly. I was so tired, and he was really annoying. In this context, is not a comparison. It is a way to introduce a quote or a feeling. It replaces said or thought. If you are waiting for the word to mean similar to, you will be confused. You need to train your ear to filter these out or understand their function as markers of informality. When you hear you know, it is often just a habit. The speaker is checking to see if you are following, but they usually don't expect an answer. It keeps the connection alive. If you try to translate you know Literally every time, you will get distracted from the main message. Let's practice listening for this. I want you to imagine we are at a coffee shop and I am telling you a story about my weekend. Listen to how I use fillers to buy time. So, I went to this new restaurant on Saturday and, it was actually really hard to find parking. We drove around for like 20 minutes. I mean, it was ridiculous. Did you hear the structure? Gave me time to think about the detail of the parking, like emphasize the duration of time acting as a filler. I mean, allowed me to clarify my opinion. If you remove those, the sentence is just facts. I went to a new restaurant. It was hard to find parking. We drove for 20 minutes. It was ridiculous. That is clear, but it lacks the human element of storytelling. When you are listening, try to identify the story underneath the fillers. Don't let the likes and ums distract you. Just let them wash over you like background noise while you wait for the real content. Now let's move on to another fascinating aspect of listening, elliptical sentences. This is a fancy grammar term, but the concept is simple. It means leaving out words because we assume the listener already knows them. Native speakers are efficient. We hate repeating ourselves. If I ask you, "Are you coming to the party?" and you say, "Yes, I am coming to the party," you sound like a robot. You would probably just say, "Yes, I am," or just "yes." You drop the rest of the sentence. In fast speech, we do this all the time. Going to the store instead of, "Are you going to the store?" Need a hand? Instead of, "Do you need a hand?" This can be very tricky for a B1 or B2 learner because you might not recognize the verb. You might hear "need a hand" and think, "Hand? What about a hand?" But if you listen to the intonation, the rising pitch at the end, you know it is a question. The context of the situation, maybe you are carrying heavy boxes, tells you the rest. To get better at this, you need to rely heavily on context clues. If you hear a sentence that sounds incomplete, look around. What is happening? If two people are looking at a menu in a restaurant and one points and says, "Good," they are obviously asking if the dish is good or if the other person wants it. They are not just saying a random adjective. Your brain needs to fill in the blanks quickly. Is that good? Do you want that? It is a guessing game, and the more you guess, the better you get. I encourage you to watch TV shows with the subtitles turned off. Watch a scene, and when a character says a short phrase, pause it. Ask yourself, what is the full sentence here? This trains your brain to reconstruct the grammar that native speakers skip. Let's switch gears and talk about something that I know causes a lot of worry: listening to different types of media. There is a big difference between listening to a news broadcast and listening to a comedy show. The news is designed to be clear. The anchors speak in a standard accent, usually at a moderate pace. Their grammar is formal. This is a great place to start your active listening practice. However, many of you tell me you want to watch movies or stand-up comedy. That is a whole different beast. In movies, there is background noise, music, overlapping dialogue, and emotional shouting. In comedy, there is sarcasm, irony, and cultural references. Sarcasm is particularly difficult to catch. Sarcasm is when someone says the opposite of what they mean, usually with a specific tone of voice. If I say, "Oh, great, another meeting," with a flat voice and a sigh, I mean that the meeting is terrible, not great. If you only listen to the words, you will misunderstand completely. To understand sarcasm, you have to listen to the melody. The voice usually goes flatter. It loses its energy. It might be louder or quieter than usual. It creates a contrast with the literal meaning of the words. For example, imagine I spill coffee all over my shirt. My friend looks at me and says, "Well, that was smart." If they say it with a rising, cheerful melody, they might genuinely think I did something clever. But if they say it with a low, monotone drone, "Well, that was smart," they mean I was clumsy. Hearing that difference is crucial for understanding social dynamics. If you miss the sarcasm, you might think someone is complimenting you when they are actually teasing you. My advice is to watch scenes from sitcoms. These shows rely heavily on sarcasm. Watch them first without subtitles and try to guess the emotions. Are the characters being honest or are they joking? Then check with subtitles to see if you were right. Another challenging area is listening to instructions or directions. This is a practical skill that you might need in real life. If you ask someone for directions on the street, they will speak quickly. They will use a lot of prepositional phrases. Go down the street, take a left at the bank, go past the park, and it's on your right. This is a stream of information that you need to process sequentially. If you miss one step, the whole direction is useless. The best strategy here is to learn the sequence markers, words like first, then, after that, finally. These words act as signposts. When you hear then, get ready for the next step. Also, listen for landmarks, the bank, the park, the traffic light. These are more important than go or walk. If you catch left and bank, you have enough to start. Don't be afraid to ask a speaker to slow down. "Could you speak a little slower, please?" is a perfectly normal and polite thing to say. Native speakers usually don't mind repeating themselves if they see you are genuinely trying to understand. I also want to talk about the emotional color of words. We have words that sound happy, words that sound sad, and words that sound angry, regardless of their literal meaning. This is about connotation, but for listening, it is about the sound of the vowels. Think about the difference between a long, stretched vowel and a short, clipped vowel. Woo with a long sound shows amazement or surprise. Wow with a short sound can be sarcastic or just a quick acknowledgement. When you listen, pay attention to how the speaker plays the word. Musicians bend notes, speakers bend words. A simple word like really can be a question, a statement, or an exclamation depending entirely on the pitch. Really? Rising pitch, surprise. Really? Falling pitch, confirmation. Really? Lengthened pitch, skepticism, or interest. These subtle variations carry so much meaning. Let's do a visualization exercise for this. I want you to close your eyes if you can, or just stare at a blank wall. I am going to say the sentence, "I can't believe it," in 3 different ways. Don't worry about the words, just listen to the feeling. Ready? First, "I can't believe it." High pitch, loud, excited. That was happy shock. Second, "I can't believe it." Low pitch, quiet, slow. That was disappointed disbelief. Third, "I can't believe it." Rising pitch, uncertain. That is asking for clarification. Did you hear the 3 different stories? The words did not change. The spelling is identical, but the sound told you everything. When you are listening to English, try to tune into this emotional radio station. Stop analyzing the grammar and start feeling the emotion. It will give you a much deeper understanding of the speaker's intent. Now, I want to touch on a very specific listening skill that often appears in exams and professional settings. Listening for agreement and disagreement. In a conversation, You will often hear two people discussing a topic. You need to know if they agree or disagree. Sometimes they do it politely. In many cultures, disagreement is very direct. But in English, especially British or formal American English, we often soften our disagreement. We might say, "I see your point, but," or "I'm not so sure about that." If you are waiting for the word "no" or "I disagree," you might miss it. We rarely say, "I disagree" directly. Instead, we use hesitation and polite phrases. If you hear "yes, but," you can be sure that a disagreement is coming. The word "but" acts like an eraser. It wipes away everything said before it. You did a great job, but. This means the speaker is about to criticize you. Listening for these contrast words like "but," "however," and "although" is essential for understanding the true dynamics of a conversation. Let's try a mini scenario. Listen to this short exchange. "I think we should buy the red car. It looks so cool." And the response is, "It is cool. True. But the blue one is much cheaper and safer." Did you hear the structure? The speaker acknowledged the first point. It is cool, true. Then use the magic word "but." That tells you the speaker prefers the blue car. If you stopped listening after "it is cool," you would think they agreed. You have to keep listening for the "but." This is why listening is an endurance sport. You have to stay alert until the very end of the sentence. Native speakers often put the most important information at the end. We call this end weight. We build up to the main point. Despite the rain, the cold, and the late hour, we decided to go. The decision to go is at the very end. You have to wait for it. I want to take a moment to discuss background noise. In the real world, there is rarely perfect silence. There are cars, birds, air conditioners, other people talking. This background noise can be incredibly frustrating for learners. It masks the sounds you are trying to hear. However, dealing with noise is a skill you must develop. You cannot control the environment. The trick is to focus your attention like a laser beam. This is called the cocktail party effect. It is the brain's ability to focus one's auditory attention on a particular stimulus while filtering out a range of other stimuli, like at a noisy party. You can train this. Try listening to podcasts where there is some ambient sound, like a coffee shop soundscape, or listen to audiobooks where there are sound effects. It forces your brain to work harder to isolate the voice. It builds resilience. If you are struggling with background noise, focus on the consonant sounds. Vowels are the melody, but consonants are the structure. They carry the meaning. In a noisy room, the vowels can get drowned out, but the sharp sounds like T, K, S, and P often cut through. If you can catch the consonants, you can often reconstruct the word. CT might be cat, cut, or coat, but combined with the context, you can usually guess. Don't give up just because it's noisy. Lean in. Focus on the sharp sounds. Let's talk about something fun, storytelling. We all love a good story. When people tell stories, their language changes. They use narrative tenses. They use the past simple for the main events, the past continuous for the background, and the past perfect for things that happened before. I was walking down the street, background, when I saw an old friend, main event, who I hadn't seen in years, background history. Hearing the shift between these tenses helps you understand the timeline. If you hear had, like had seen or had gone, your brain should immediately flag that as flashback or earlier. It takes practice to hear these small auxiliary verbs because they are often weak forms. Had becomes hud or even just d. I'd seen him. That tiny D sound carries a huge amount of grammatical information. To practice this, listen to biographies or historical accounts, anything with a timeline. Draw a timeline on a piece of paper as you listen. Mark the points. Born here, moved here, graduated there. This visual aid helps you organize the audio information. It connects the sound to a concrete image. When you connect sound to image, you remember it better. You are using both sides of your brain, the analytical side for the grammar and the creative side for the visualization. As we move deeper into our session, I want to remind you about the importance of reviewing. If you listen to something once, you might catch 50%. If you listen again, you catch 70%. If you listen a third time, maybe 90%. Repetition is the mother of skill. There is no shame in listening to the same podcast episode 5 times. In fact, that is the smart way to learn. You will notice new things every time. You will hear a connected speech pattern you missed before. You will recognize a vocabulary word you just learned. It is like watching a movie for the second time. You see the details you missed the first time because you weren't worrying about the plot. You can just enjoy the scenery. I also want to encourage you to vary your input. Don't just listen to one voice. Listen to men, women, children, elderly people. Men's voices are usually lower in pitch, which can make certain sounds harder to distinguish. Women's voices might be higher. Children might speak faster or have less clear pronunciation. Exposing yourself to this variety makes you a robust listener. If you only listen to me, you will get very good at understanding me. But the goal is to understand the world. Go out and find different voices. TED Talks are a great resource for this. You have speakers from all over the world with different accents and different speaking styles, all giving fascinating presentations. Let's explore some more subtle but incredibly important aspects of listening that will really help you break through that intermediate plateau. Have you ever noticed that sometimes English sounds like it has holes in it, like pieces are missing? We talked a little about this with the schwa sound, but today I want to focus specifically on something called the glottal stop. This is a very common feature in modern English, especially in British English, but you will hear it in American English too. A glottal stop happens when we stop the flow of air in our throat completely instead of pronouncing a T sound. Imagine you are holding your breath for a split second. For example, the word water. In standard pronunciation, you might hear waiter with a clear T sound, but in everyday speech, many people say wayer. The T is replaced by a tiny pause. Wayer. It sounds like the word is broken in two. This can be very confusing for learners because you are expecting to hear that crisp T sound. You might be waiting for water, but you hear something that sounds like wah, and your brain thinks, what is a wah? But if you know about the glottal stop, you can recognize it instantly. It happens a lot with words that end in T, especially when the next word begins with a consonant. I don't know. Often we don't say don't with a clear T. We say I don't know. The T disappears, or the phrase apartment. You might hear apartment. It gives the language a staccato rhythmic feel. My advice to you is not to worry about pronouncing it perfectly yourself right now, but to simply recognize it when you hear it. When you hear that sudden silence or a blocked sound where a T should be, just mentally fill in the T. It is like a puzzle piece that is painted invisible. It is there, but you just can't see it or hear it, in this case. Now, let's move on to something called linking. This is the opposite of the glottal stop. If the glottal stop is about silence, linking is about connection. Linking is the reason why English sounds like a stream of water flowing, rather than a row of bricks sitting side by side. When one word ends with a consonant sound and the next word begins with a vowel sound, we link them together. We push them together so they sound like one word. Let's take a very common example. Check it out. You rarely hear check it out. That sounds robotic. Instead, we say check-it-out. It sounds like chick out or check it out. The K sound at the end of check attaches to the it, and the T at the end of it attaches to the out. This is crucial for your listening. If you are waiting for a pause between words, you will never hear it. You have to learn to hear the boundaries inside the sound stream. It is like listening to music. You don't wait for a silence between every note. You hear the melody. To practice this, try something called back chaining. This is a technique where you build a sentence from the end. Let's try it together. We will use the sentence, turn it off. Start with the last word, off. Now add the word before it off. But link them, teed off. See how the T moves? Teed off. Now add the first word, turn teed off. Turn it off. It flows. Practicing this physically with your mouth helps your ear to recognize the pattern when someone else speaks it. If you can say it, you can hear it. Let's look at another linking rule. When a word ends in a vowel sound and the next word begins with a vowel sound, we often insert a tiny sound to bridge the gap. This is often a Y sound or a W sound. Listen to this. I agree. We don't say I agree. We say I agree. It sounds like the word yay in the middle. I agree. Or go away. We say go away. It sounds like a W. These little bridge sounds are not written down. They are invisible helpers. They make the speaking smoother. For a listener, if you don't expect them, you might think you are hearing an extra word. Why did he say way in go way? He didn't. He was just linking. Being aware of these bridges helps you stop chasing ghost words that don't actually exist. Now I want to talk about a very specific area where listening often breaks down, numbers and quantities. We touched on this briefly before, but let's go deeper. Numbers in context can be incredibly slippery. The problem isn't usually the number itself, it's the speed. In a news report, they might say, the stock market dropped 250 points in just 3 minutes. That is a lot of information, 250. And often, we shorten it, 250. We drop the 100, 250. That sounds like $2.50 or 250. Context is your only savior here. If you are listening to a financial report, you know they aren't talking about the price of a coffee. They are talking about points. Another tricky area is ordinals versus cardinals. Cardinal numbers are 1, 2, 3. Ordinals are first, second, third. In fast speech, the th-chi sound at the end of fifth or sixth is very quiet. Fifth can sound like fifth. Sixth sounds like six. If you hear the fifth floor, your brain needs to jump to fifth. Or dates. July 4th. We often say July 4. It is lazy, but it happens. If you are listening for directions or dates, pay attention to the word before the number. The year 2024. Page 45. These markers tell you that a number is coming. When you hear a marker like total, sum, price, or date, tune your ears to number mode. It is like shifting gears in a car. You are now in number gear. Let's move on to a fascinating topic, minimal pairs. These are words that differ by only one sound. Ship versus sheep. Hat versus hut, or tree versus three. For a listener, mixing these up can change the entire meaning of a sentence. Imagine someone says, "I'm waiting for the sheep," but they actually said ship. You would be very confused looking for an animal in a harbor. Or the classic example, "I hurt my knees" versus "I hurt my niece." The difference is the N sound versus the ni sound. In many languages, these sound differences don't exist, so your brain ignores them. You have to retrain your brain to hear that tiny difference. How do you do that? You practice with contrast. Find a list of minimal pairs online. Listen to them side by side. Bit, beat. Bit, beat. The vowel sound in bit is short. Your mouth is relaxed. Bit. The vowel sound in beat is long. Your smile is wider. Beat. When you are listening to a podcast or a conversation, pay attention to the length of the vowel. Is it short and quick, or is it long and stretched? Often the context will save you. You don't usually find sheep in the ocean, and you don't usually see a ship on a farm. But focusing on that vowel length is a great detail to practice. If you can hear the difference between fill and feel, you are reaching an advanced level of perception. I also want to talk about the hidden meaning in adverbs. Adverbs are words that modify verbs, like quickly, slowly, happily. But in conversation, we use adverbs to signal our attitude. Words like actually, basically, frankly, and apparently. These are powerful signals. For example, if I say, "Apparently it's going to rain," I am telling you that I heard this information from someone else. I am not 100% sure. I am distancing myself from the fact. But if I say, "It is going to rain," I am certain. Apparently acts as a shield. If it doesn't rain, I can say, "Well, I said apparently." Or the word frankly. "Frankly, I don't like it." This signals that the speaker is about to be honest, maybe even a little rude or direct. It prepares you for a strong opinion. When you are listening, catch these adverbs. They act like a lens through which the rest of the sentence should be viewed. Basically means I am about to simplify a complex idea. Actually often signals a correction or a contrast to what was expected. I thought he was tall, but actually, he's quite short. These little words are the glue of logic. They tell you how the information fits together. If you miss them, you miss the relationship between the ideas. Let's shift our focus to the structure of spoken texts. When you listen to a lecture, a TED Talk, or even a long story on a podcast, there is usually a structure. It starts with an introduction, followed by main points, and ends with a conclusion. This seems obvious, but many learners get lost in the details and forget the structure. When you are listening, try to hear the signposting language. These are phrases that tell you where the speaker is going. First of all, moving on to in conclusion. For instance, these phrases are like road signs. They tell you where you are on the map. If you hear, for instance, your brain should switch to example mode. You know a story or a specific detail is coming to support a point. If you hear, on the other hand, your brain should switch to contrast mode. You know a different perspective is coming. Recognizing these signposts allows you to predict what is coming next, which makes listening much easier. You aren't just reacting to sounds, you are anticipating the flow of logic. If you are listening to a long audio track, try writing down just the signposts you hear. You will find that you can reconstruct the whole outline of the talk just from those phrases. It is a great way to practice organizational listening. Now I want to address a very human problem: distraction. We have all been there. You are listening to something in English and suddenly your mind drifts off. You start thinking about what you are going to eat for dinner or an email you need to send. Then suddenly you realize you haven't heard a word for the last 30 seconds. It happens to native speakers too. Don't be hard on yourself. The key is learning how to recover. How do you jump back into the stream? The trick is to listen for re-entry keywords. These are words that stand out because they are stressed or repeated. If you zone out and come back, don't panic. Listen for a moment. What word is the speaker emphasizing? If I am telling a story and I realize you got distracted, I might say, "So the point is," or "Anyway." These words signal a summary or a return to the main topic. Anyway, we finally found the car. If you tune in right then, you catch the resolution of the story. Also, repetition is key. Speakers usually repeat their main points. If you miss it the first time, listen for it again. Don't try to rewind your memory. Just start listening right now. Let go of what you missed. Focus on the present sound. Let's talk about something that happens in every conversation: interruptions. In a scripted dialogue, people take turns nicely. In real life, we interrupt each other all the time. This is chaotic listening. You might be listening to person A, and suddenly person B starts talking over them. This can be very frustrating. How do you know who to listen to? Usually, the person who speaks louder or maintains the rhythm wins the turn. But often, the interruption is the reaction. If person A says, "I think we should sell the house," and person B immediately shouts, "No way!" The interruption, "no way," is the important emotional reaction. You don't need to hear the rest of person A's sentence because it was cut off. Learning to listen to overlap is an advanced skill. It requires you to split your attention for a moment. If you are watching a video, the visuals help. You can see whose mouth is moving. If you are listening to an audio-only podcast, it can be harder. Try to focus on the voice that is winning. The voice that stays steady or gets louder is usually the one carrying the main message. The other voice is often fading out. Also, listen for phrases like, "Let me finish," or "Hold on." These phrases signal that the speaker is fighting to keep the floor. It tells you that there is a conflict or a high-energy debate happening. This adds drama and interest to the listening. I want to discuss the importance of cultural context in listening. Language is not just words, it is culture. Sometimes you will understand every word, but still not understand the meaning because you lack the cultural context. For example, references to sports are very common in business English. Hit a home run, step up to the plate, drop the ball. If you don't know baseball, these phrases make no sense. You might hear, "He really dropped the ball on this project," and imagine a physical ball falling, but the meaning is, he made a mistake. He failed to do his job. When you hear a phrase that seems literal, but doesn't fit the context, it is probably an idiom or a cultural reference. Don't ignore these. When you hear them, write them down. Look them up later. Over time, you will build a library of these cultural codes. Movies are full of them. Listening to comedies is particularly hard because they rely on shared cultural knowledge to make jokes. But don't worry, you don't need to know everything. You just need to be curious. When you hear a strange reference, think, "Aha, a mystery." It makes the listening process an adventure of discovery. As we near the end of our session, I want to give you a specific exercise to try this week. It is called the 5-minute transcription. Find a podcast or a video with a transcript. Listen to just 5 minutes, but try to write down exactly what you hear. Every gonna. Try to capture the messy reality of the speech. Then, compare your writing to the official transcript. You will be shocked. You will see the difference between what you thought you heard and what was actually said. You might see that you missed an S at the end of a word, or a have that was barely spoken. This is not a test. It is a diagnostic tool. It shows you exactly where your listening blind spots are. It is one of the most powerful exercises you can do to improve accuracy. And please remember to enjoy the process. I know I say this a lot, but it is so important. If you treat listening as a chore, your brain will resist. If you treat it as a way to connect with interesting ideas, your brain will open up. Listen to things that make you laugh. Listen to things that make you cry. Listen to things that make you angry. Emotion is the glue of memory. If you hear a phrase in a movie that makes you laugh, you will remember that phrase forever. The emotional context anchors the sound in your memory. Before we finish, I want to mention the mental game. Learning a language is a marathon. There will be days when you feel like you are making no progress. You will have days where the English seems to be just noise. This is normal. It is called the intermediate plateau. You are good enough to communicate, but not yet fluent. It feels like you are stuck, but you are not stuck. You are absorbing. You are consolidating. Even on days when you feel you understood nothing, your brain was still working. It was still mapping the sounds. Do not be discouraged. Celebrate the small victories. Celebrate when you understand a joke. Celebrate when you hear a phrasal verb used correctly. Celebrate when you guess the meaning of a word correctly. These little wins add up to fluency. So, here is your mission for the coming week. I want you to find a piece of audio that is slightly difficult for you. Maybe a TED Talk or a podcast interview. I want you to use the 3-pass method. Pass 1. Listen for the general idea. Summarize it in 1 sentence. Pass 2. Listen for 3 specific details, maybe 3 facts or 3 numbers. Write them down. Pass 3. Listen for the emotion. How did the speaker feel? Were they passionate? Were they neutral? By breaking your listening down into these 3 specific tasks, you take the pressure off. You don't have to get everything at once. You focus on one thing at a time. It is much more manageable and much less tiring. And finally, please remember that listening is an act of connection. When you listen to someone, you are giving them your time and attention. It is a gift. Don't let the anxiety of language learning rob you of that connection. When you speak to a native speaker, look them in the eye, nod your head, use your body language to show you are engaged. Even if you miss a few words, the human connection is still there. You are communicating. You are building a bridge. That is what language is for. It is not a test to be passed. It is a tool for bringing us closer together. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, Jessica, on English in Advance. It has been a joy to explore these deeper listening strategies with you. We've covered so much ground today, from the silent T to the chaotic beauty of interruptions. I hope you feel more equipped to tackle the complexities of real English. Remember to breathe, trust your brain, and keep those ears open. You are doing an amazing job. Don't give up. I believe in you. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next episode. Happy listening, everyone.